tear them down." Turkey launches attack on US-backed Kurds in northern Syria. The Turkish army, supported by Syrian rebels, has launched an attack on the Syrian city of Afrin, held by US-supported Kurdish militia, opening yet another front in war-torn Syria. The Turkish military fired some 40 rounds of artillery into Afrin from Turkish border posts yesterday, and deployed more than 8,000 Turkish-backed Free Syrian army fighters who carried Turkish flags as they were bussed into the areas over the past few days. Local media quoted Turkey's military officials as saying warplanes had so far struck 108 out of a total of 113 Syrian Kurdish militia targets in the Afrin region, including a military airport. Last week, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan warned Turkish forces in Syria would vanquish Kurdish militia that control Afrin, along the Turkish border. "God willing, in the coming days, we will continue the operation to purge our southern border from terror," he said in a speech in the eastern Turkish city of Elazığ. Kurdish militia group YGP have been receiving training and weapons from a US-led coalition for several years to fight the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. The coalition is now training a 30,000-strong border force to protect Kurdish areas of Syria including Afrin, a move that angered Turkey, who views YGP as an extension of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, a group that has waged a 4-decade insurgency in Turkey and is considered a terrorist group by the European Union, Turkey and the United States. "If the terrorists in Afrin don't surrender, we will tear them down," Mr. Erdogan said. Civilians flee as Kurds prepare to fight. Activists on the ground confirmed there were ongoing airstrikes and shelling. Civilians have begun fleeing to the city of Aleppo and some villages were emptied of women and children. The YPG forces said they were left with no choice but to fight back. "We will defeat this aggression, like we have defeated other such assaults against our villages and cities," they announced. Vladimir van Welgenberg, a Kurdish analyst based in the region, said the Kurds were prepared for hard resistance. "The YPG have been ready for such an attack for years, and have tunnels and defense positions," he said, but added some of these positions had already been hit by airstrikes. "If Turkey uses Syrian rebels, the YPG will be able to resist and it could be a bloody battle." Turkish troops entered Idlib 3 months ago after an agreement with Russia and Iran for the three countries to try to reduce fighting between pro-Syrian government forces and rebel fighters in the largest remaining insurgent-held part of Syria. But Turkey is now using its position inside Syria to launch the attack from all sides. Direct military action against territory held by Kurdish militia opens a new front in Syria's civil war and sees Ankara confronting Kurds allied to the United States at a time when Turkey's relations with Washington are reaching breaking point. Turkish officials said the operation against Afrin would be followed by an operation against Manbij, another Kurdish-held territory on the Euphrates River. The operation could spill into a wider Turkish-Kurdish confrontation inside Turkey. It also threatens to turn into a humanitarian disaster. The Afrin district houses no less than 800,000 civilians, including displaced people from earlier years of the Syrian war. "This is not what allies do." A group of prominent academics and human rights activists called Turkey's attack on Afrin a blatant act of aggression against a peaceful and democratically governed region and population. The group, including scholar and activist Noam Chomsky, urged the leaders of Russia, Iran and the United States to prevent Turkey from carrying out the offensive against the Syrian Kurdish-controlled enclave. Their statement, released yesterday, praised the YPG for their effective fight against the Islamic State group in Syria. It said, "The US and international community have a moral obligation to stand behind the Kurdish people now." Earlier this week, Mr. Erdogan criticized the US for arming the Kurds, saying, "This is not what allies do." Mr. Erdogan said he hoped the US would not give rise to error by appearing on the same side as the terror organization. Two U.S. officials speaking on condition of anonymity said the Trump administration had been urging Turkey not to attack Afrin, asking Turkish officials to avoid unilateral actions. But so far the U.S. has publicly remained silent since the operation began. Russian green light. Yesterday evening, Russia's defense ministry said it was pulling back troops that had been deployed near the Syrian city of Afrin. Mr. Van Wilgenberg said it was difficult to say why, but that it seemed Russia had given a green light to the operation. Maybe in exchange for Turkish concessions in Idlib, peace talks in Sochi, or a new oil deal, he said. Moscow's green light is necessary for a Turkish operation into Afrin, where Russian military observers have deployed since last year to prevent such a confrontation. Russia, Iran and Turkey are interested in limiting the U.S. presence in Syria, and have protested Washington's plans to create the predominantly Kurdish border force. Turkey's assault in Afrin comes as the Syrian government operation to take Idlib intensifies. A Syrian Kurdish official, Ilham Ahmed, said the Russians were bargaining with Turkey over Afrin in exchange for allowing the government to take Idlib. Russia would prefer handing over Idlib to the Syrian government, instead of Turkey-backed opposition fighters. What to do without the linked groups who hold large amounts of territory in Idlib remains a dilemma for all parties, and is a sticking point between the US and Turkey. Undermining the Kurdish dream. With this assault on Afrin, Turkey could undermine the Kurdish dream of federalized rule in northern Syria. Driving the Kurdish militia out of Afrin would also allow Turkey-backed Syrian fighters supporting its offensive to link Idlib to Syria's largest city, Aleppo. But Mr. Van Wilgenberg said a lengthy operation in Syria could lead to protests and more instability inside Turkey itself. The timing reflects Turkey's increased frustration with U.S. support for Kurdish forces in Syria, who are now in control of nearly 25% of the country, in areas that straddle the Turkish and Iraqi border. Turkey remains a loyal and trusted friend and ally of the U.S. and the West, Ilnur Sevik, an Erdogan presidential advisor, wrote in the Turkish newspaper Sabah. But that does not mean we will accept being treated as sacrificial animals just because a couple of American generals want to embark on an adventure in the Middle East.